Lucky American coins. I can write this as a long, continuous YouTube-style documentary script for your Coin Luster channel, but I need to keep one important point accurate. There is no verified evidence that a 1984 Lincoln cent has a current market value of $298 million. The well-known 1984 double die obverse variety is genuinely collectible, and can be worth substantially more than an ordinary 1984 penny, but documented auction records are nowhere near $298 million. PCGS lists the 1984 double die obverse as a major variety, with doubling especially visible around Lincoln's ear, beard, and bow tie. The listed auction record for the road variety is $3,910, while the standard 1984 cent has a mintage of more than 8.1 billion. The coin weighs 2.50 grams, measures 19 millimeters, and is copper-plated zinc. Content reference, OASite, 0 index equals 0 because a 10,000 plus word script is too large for a single response. I'll provide it in continuous parts, while keeping the narration free of headings and section labels, as requested. Writing a variant equals document, ID equals 58321. Imagine finding a small 1-cent coin that has been sitting unnoticed in an old jar, a forgotten collection, a box of loose change, or perhaps even in a drawer that nobody has opened for decades. At first glance, it may look like nothing more than an ordinary American penny, a tiny piece of copper-colored metal that most people would barely notice. But then you turn it over in your fingers, look closely at the date, and see 4 numbers that suddenly make the coin much more interesting. 1984. You examine the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, and something seems different. Maybe the ear appears doubled. Maybe the beard has an unusual secondary outline. Perhaps the bow tie seems to show an extra impression. You begin wondering whether you have discovered a rare mint error, a valuable die variety, or simply a damaged coin that has been misunderstood. This is exactly where the fascinating world of coin collecting begins. The 1984 United States 1-cent coin is one of those pieces that can teach collectors an enormous amount about rarity, minting technology, historical change, condition, authentication, and the difference between an ordinary coin and a genuinely important variety. It is also a perfect example of why coin collectors should never judge a coin's value simply by its age. A coin does not automatically become valuable because it is old, and a coin does not automatically become extremely valuable because someone on the internet claims that it is worth millions of dollars. Real coin values are established through a combination of rarity, condition, demand, authenticity, documented sales, and the specific characteristics that make one example different from millions of others. The 1984 Lincoln cent is particularly interesting because the year sits within an important period in the history of American small cents. By 1984, the United States Mint was producing pennies using the copper-plated zinc composition introduced earlier in the decade. This was a major change from the traditional bronze composition used for many decades. The familiar Lincoln cent had been transformed internally, even though its appearance remained remarkably similar to the coins Americans had known for generations. On the outside, the coin still carried the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln. On the reverse, it still displayed the Lincoln Memorial. The denomination remained 1 cent. The diameter remained approximately 19 millimeters. The edge remained plain. But underneath the attractive copper-colored surface was a zinc core surrounded by a thin layer of copper. According to PCGS Coin Facts, the 1984 Lincoln cent has a weight of 2.50 grams and a diameter of 19.00 millimeters, with a copper-plated zinc composition. The Philadelphia issue had a reported mintage of 8,151,079,000 pieces. That enormous production figure immediately tells us something important. The ordinary 1984 penny is not rare simply because it is a 1984 coin. More than 8 billion Philadelphia examples were produced, and additional cents were struck at other United States mint facilities. Therefore, When collectors search for a valuable 1984 penny, they are not generally looking for an ordinary example. They are looking for something unusual, something scarce, something that has survived in exceptional condition, or something that contains a genuine mint-made variety or error. Content reference, OA site. 1 index equals 1. This is where the famous 1984 double die obverse enters the story. The term double die is often misunderstood by people who are new to coin collecting. Many people imagine that a doubled coin was simply struck twice by the coin press. That is not how a true double die variety is created. A genuine double die is created earlier in the die-making process, when the design is transferred to a working die and a misalignment or variation produces duplicated design elements. When that die is later used to strike coins, the same distinctive doubling can appear repeatedly on every coin produced from that particular die. That distinction is incredibly important. A coin can show doubling because of a true double die, or it can show what collectors call machine doubling or strike doubling. These are not the same thing. Machine doubling generally occurs during the striking process when the die or planchette shifts slightly, leaving a flattened or shelf-like secondary appearance. A true double die typically produces a more distinct separation of design elements, often with rounded, raised, or clearly separated secondary details depending on the variety. For the 1984 Lincoln cent, the most famous variety is the double die obverse. This variety is recognized by collectors because the doubling can be seen in important areas of Lincoln's portrait. PCGS describes the 1984 double die obverse as a major variety and notes that the doubling is particularly evident around Lincoln's ear, with strong doubling also visible in the beard and bow tie. The variety was discovered in the same year the coins were struck, making it an interesting part of modern Lincoln cent collecting history. PCGS also indicates that possibly several thousand examples exist across all grades combined. Content reference, OA site. 2 index equals 2 or 4. Someone examining a 1984 penny, the ear is therefore one of the most important areas to inspect. Imagine holding the coin under a bright light. You slowly rotate it. Abraham Lincoln's portrait becomes clearer. Instead of looking only at the date, you begin studying the details of his face. You examine the ear. Does the ear show a distinct secondary outline? Does the doubling appear to be part of the die design rather than random damage? Does the same type of doubling appear in other diagnostic areas? You then examine the beard and bow tie. The more characteristics that match the recognized variety, the more interesting the coin becomes. This is where patience becomes more valuable than excitement. A collector who sees something unusual may immediately think, "I have found $1 million penny." But professional coin collecting requires a much more careful approach. The first question is not how much the coin is worth. The first question is whether the coin is actually the variety you think it is. The second question is whether the coin is authentic. The third question is its condition. The fourth question is how the market values that particular combination of variety and grade. And only after those questions have been answered can a realistic value estimate be made. This is also why claims of a 1984 penny being worth $298 million should be treated extremely cautiously. There is no verified auction record supporting a $298 million market value for a 1984 Lincoln cent. Such figures can appear in viral videos, sensational articles, social media posts, or automated content, but a claim repeated many times does not become a documented sale. In the real numismatic market, collectors and dealers rely on evidence. They look at certified coins, auction archives, population reports, variety attribution, and comparable transactions. For a 1984 double die obverse Lincoln cent, the actual value can be dramatically higher than face value, especially when the coin is authenticated and preserved in a high grade. But it is still important to distinguish valuable from worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Those are completely different statements. Here is part 2, continuing in the same long-form narration style without headings or section labels, and keeping the valuation claims accurate. Writing a variant equals document, ID equals 74106. The story becomes even more fascinating when we begin to understand what actually happens inside a United States mint facility before a coin ever reaches a person's pocket. When most people look at a penny, they see a finished object. They see the date, the portrait, the inscriptions, and perhaps the mint mark. A collector, however, sees something much more complicated. A collector sees the final product of a manufacturing process involving artwork, hubs, dies, planches, presses, quality control, and enormous quantities of metal blanks moving through high-speed production equipment. Every 1984 Lincoln cent began its life long before it became a coin. The design had to be prepared. The dies had to be manufactured. The metal blanks had to be produced. The blanks had to be plated when necessary. The dies had to be installed. The press had to strike the planches. And then the finished coins had to be inspected and distributed. At each stage, there was a possibility that something could happen differently from what was intended. Most of those differences were insignificant. Some were considered defects. A few became collectible. And an extremely small number became famous. This is why collectors are fascinated by mint errors and die varieties. They are physical evidence of the manufacturing process. They allow us to see something that was never supposed to happen, or something that happened differently from the normal production process. The 1984 double die obverse is particularly interesting because its unusual characteristics were created in the die itself. The result was that the doubling appeared on coins struck from that die. This is fundamentally different from a coin that was damaged after leaving the mint. Imagine a normal 1984 Lincoln cent sitting next to a genuine double die example. At a distance, they look nearly identical. The same Abraham Lincoln is present. The same date appears. The same inscriptions surround the portrait. Both coins may have the same diameter and weight. Both may have been produced in the same year. But under magnification, the differences become visible. The ear is different. The beard is different. The bow tie is different. The details appear to have an additional impression. This is where the excitement begins. A collector might spend hours comparing the two coins. One is ordinary. One is a recognized variety. The difference may seem incredibly small to someone who has never studied coins, but to a specialist, that small difference is the entire reason the coin is collectible. This is a fundamental principle in numismatics. Collectors are not always interested in the biggest or most obvious differences. Sometimes the smallest details create the greatest interest. A tiny variation in a die can create thousands of coins with the same unusual characteristic. If those coins are identified, catalogued, and recognized by the collecting community, they can become an important variety. The 1984 double die obverse demonstrates this perfectly. It is also important to understand why the term double die creates confusion. Many people assume that if a coin appears to have a doubled image, the coin must be valuable. That is not true. There are different forms of doubling. A true double die is created during die production. Machine doubling is created during the striking process. Mechanical doubling can produce a secondary image that looks flat, shelf-like, or cut into the design. Damage can create false doubling. Die deterioration can sometimes create unusual outlines. Photography and lighting can exaggerate details. Even the angle at which a coin is viewed can make a normal design appear doubled. This is why experienced collectors never rely on one blurry photograph or one unusual feature. They study the entire coin. They compare known diagnostics. They understand the difference between raised design elements and damaged surfaces. They examine the direction of the doubling. They look at the shape and placement of the secondary image. They consider whether the feature is consistent with a known variety. And when the stakes are high, they seek professional attribution. This is especially important because the Internet has made it easier than ever for inaccurate information to spread. A person can take a photograph of a damaged penny, upload it to social media, and claim that it is a rare error worth thousands of dollars. Another person shares the post. Then another. Soon, hundreds or thousands of people have seen the claim. Eventually, the original photograph may appear alongside a completely different price. This process can create enormous confusion. A coin that is worth a few cents can suddenly be described as worth thousands. A coin that is worth several $100s can suddenly be described as worth millions. And a coin with a documented auction record can eventually be associated with a completely fictional value. This is why collectors should always return to primary evidence. What did the coin actually sell for? Where was it sold? Was it authenticated? What grade did it receive? Was the coin a normal issue, or a recognized variety? Was the price for the coin itself, or was it a combined price for an entire collection? Was the figure a genuine transaction, or simply an asking price? These questions can prevent enormous misunderstandings. The 1984 Lincoln cent is a perfect example. The ordinary coin was struck in huge quantities. The famous double die variety is considerably scarcer. But neither fact supports the claim that an ordinary 1984 penny is worth $298 million. The documented market evidence tells a different story. Professional records show that high-grade examples of the recognized variety can reach thousands of dollars, with PCGS reporting a $3,910 auction record for a 1984 double die obverse red example in MS-68. That is a significant premium over 1 cent, but it is also dramatically different from $298 million. PCGS.com https://www.pcgs.com/coin/coin/306/2?*source=chatgpt.com. The difference between a real auction record and a sensational claim is enormous. A genuine auction record tells you what a buyer actually paid. An unsupported claim tells you only what someone wants you to believe. For collectors, that distinction is essential. Now imagine that you have found a 1984 penny that appears to show doubling. The first thing you should do is stop. Do not clean it. Do not polish it. Do not scratch the surface. Do not attempt to remove discoloration. Do not put it into a chemical solution. Do not use an abrasive material. The coin may be worth more in its original condition, even if it appears dirty. Collectors value originality. A coin that has been cleaned may lose some of its desirability because the original surface has been altered. The best approach is simple. Hold the coin by the edge. Place it somewhere safe. Use a soft surface underneath it so that it does not fall onto a hard table. Then examine it under good lighting. A magnifying glass or loupe can help. A microscope can provide even more detail. But magnification should be used carefully. Extreme magnification can sometimes make normal imperfections appear dramatic. The goal is not simply to make the coin look unusual. The goal is to determine whether the unusual appearance corresponds to a recognized variety. This is where reference material becomes essential. A collector can compare the suspected coin with photographs of authenticated examples. If the ear appears doubled, compare the exact shape. If the beard appears doubled, compare the location. If the bow tie appears doubled, compare the direction and structure. The characteristics should make sense together. A genuine double die is not simply a coin with random damage in 3 places. It is a coin struck from a specific die with consistent characteristics. This consistency is one of the most powerful tools available. Here is part 3, continuing the same narration without headings or section labels. Writing a variant equals document, ID equals 31684. The deeper you go into the world of the 1984 Lincoln cent, the more you begin to understand that finding a potentially valuable coin is only the first step. The real challenge is proving what you have found. A coin can look unusual and still be ordinary. A coin can look ordinary and still be rare. The difference between those two possibilities is often hidden in details that require patience, knowledge, and sometimes professional examination. This is especially true when searching for the 1984 double die obverse. The first thing a collector must learn is that not all doubling is created equal. The word doubling sounds simple, but in the world of numismatics it can describe several completely different phenomena. A collector who does not understand these differences can easily become confused. A true double die is created during the production of the die itself. The die is the tool that strikes the coin. If the design is transferred to the die more than once in slightly different positions, the finished die can contain duplicated design details. Every coin struck by that die can then display those characteristics. This means that the doubling is part of the die. It is not damage. It is not something that happened because someone dropped the coin. It is not something created by a machine after the coin was struck. It is part of the manufacturing history of the coin. This is what makes a genuine double die so interesting. The 1984 double die obverse is a recognized example of this phenomenon. Collectors have identified distinctive doubling around Lincoln's ear, beard, and bow tie. Those characteristics make the variety identifiable when compared carefully with normal 1984 cents. PCGS.com https://www.pcgs.com/coinfax/coin/3062?coin/source=chatgpt.com. A beginner may look at the coin and think that the portrait simply appears blurry. An experienced collector looks closer. They may see a secondary outline. They may notice that the shape of the ear is unusual. They may observe that the beard has a distinct secondary image. They may inspect the bow tie. They compare the characteristics. And suddenly the coin becomes a potential variety. This process of identification is one of the most rewarding parts of coin collecting. It is also one of the most difficult. There is a reason professional collectors use reference books and specialized databases. The human eye can be fooled easily. Light reflects off the surface. Scratches create shadows. Wear removes details. Chemical exposure changes color. Mechanical damage can create shapes that look like intentional doubling. Even experienced collectors can sometimes make mistakes. That is why the best approach is never to rely on excitement alone. Excitement should make you investigate. It should not make you jump to a conclusion. If you believe you have found a valuable 1984 double die cent, begin by documenting the coin. Take photographs. Photograph the obverse. Photograph the reverse. Take close-up images of Lincoln's ear. Photograph the beard. Photograph the bow tie. Photograph the date. Photograph the entire coin. Make sure the images are clear. Use natural or neutral lighting when possible. Avoid dramatic filters. Do not digitally alter the images. The purpose is to record what the coin actually looks like. You can then compare your photographs with images of known examples. This is a powerful technique because comparison is often more useful than simply looking at the coin by itself. A normal 1984 cent can become your reference. Place it next to the suspected variety. Compare the ear. Compare the beard. Compare the bow tie. Compare the lettering. Compare the overall strike. The differences become easier to see when two coins are viewed side by side. This is how collectors train their eyes. They do not simply memorize descriptions. They compare real coins. They study photographs. They examine certified examples. Over time, their ability to recognize varieties improves. This process can take years. But even a beginner can learn the basics. The first lesson is simple. Never assume. Verify. This rule is particularly important because the internet is full of claims about rare pennies. You may see videos claiming that a 1984 penny is worth $298 million. You may see photographs of ordinary coins accompanied by enormous price tags. You may see statements suggesting that every 1984 cent is valuable. You may even see advertisements offering to buy coins for huge amounts. The collector must learn to separate information from marketing. A genuine coin dealer will usually want to inspect the coin. A professional auction house will document the coin. A grading service will authenticate and grade it. A legitimate market value will be supported by sales evidence. An unsupported internet claim may provide none of these things. That does not mean every online source is unreliable. There are many excellent resources available. The key is to identify trustworthy references. Professional grading companies. Established auction houses. Recognized numismatic organizations. Experienced dealers. Specialized coin publications. These sources can provide much more reliable information than random social media posts. The 1984 Lincoln cent also demonstrates why coin values can change over time. Suppose a variety is discovered. At first, only a few examples are known. Collectors become excited. Demand rises. Prices increase. Then more examples are found. The supply becomes better understood. Prices may stabilize. Or perhaps the variety becomes even more popular. Prices may rise again. The market is constantly changing. This means that a price listed online is not necessarily a permanent value. A coin's market value is always connected to time. The phrase current market value therefore requires careful explanation. If someone says that a 1984 double die obverse is worth $298 million today, they are making a claim that requires evidence. There is no documented evidence supporting that figure. The known auction history is dramatically lower. A high-grade example has a documented PCGS auction record in the thousands, not hundreds of millions. PCGS reports a $3,910 auction result for a red MS-68 example. PCGS.com https://www.pcgs.com/coin/coin/3062?UTM_source=chatgpt.com. That does not make the coin unimportant. It simply makes the information accurate. The difference between $3,910 and $298 million is not a small error. It is a massive difference. One is supported by documented market history. The other is not. A responsible collector should always prefer the documented number. This is particularly important for people who may be watching coin videos and hoping to find valuable coins in their own homes. If a video tells someone that every 1984 penny is worth millions, viewers may become disappointed when they discover that their coin is worth only face value. But if a video explains exactly what to look for, viewers can learn a genuine skill. They can search their coins intelligently. They can identify the real variety. They can avoid false claims. And they can understand why one coin is worth more than another. This educational approach is much more valuable. Now consider the importance of mint marks. The United States Mint has operated multiple facilities throughout its history. Different facilities produce coins with different mint marks. Here is part 4 and the ending, continuing the same long-form style without headings or section labels. Writing a variant equals document, ID equals 58241, as the story of the 1984 Lincoln cent reaches its final chapters, one fact becomes clearer than ever. The true value of a coin is not determined by the number printed in a viral headline. It is determined by evidence, rarity, condition, authenticity, historical significance, and what collectors are actually willing to pay. The 1984 Lincoln cent is a perfect example of why careful research matters. At first glance, it is an ordinary American penny. It is small. It is familiar. It has Abraham Lincoln on the front. It has the Lincoln Memorial on the back. It carries a denomination of 1 cent. Millions of people have handled one without giving it a second thought. But hidden among the enormous number of 1984 cents are examples that collectors consider much more interesting. The 1984 double die obverse is one of those examples. The variety is recognized because of distinctive doubling visible in parts of Lincoln's portrait, including the ear, beard, and bow tie. This kind of doubling is fundamentally different from random damage, or ordinary machine doubling, because it originates during the creation of the die used to strike the coin. PCGS.com https://www.pcgs.com/coin/coin/3062question/UTM_source=chatgpt.com. That difference is the heart of the story. A normal coin is struck from a normal die. A double die coin is struck from a die containing a duplicated design impression. The finished coin becomes evidence of an unusual event in the manufacturing process. This is why collectors care. The coin is not valuable simply because it looks old. It is valuable because it is different. It is not valuable because it has a famous president on it. Millions of Lincoln cents do. It is valuable because collectors recognize a specific variety that is more difficult to find than the ordinary issue. That is the foundation of its collectible premium. But even with a recognized variety, the market is not simple. Not every 1984 double die obverse is worth the same amount. Condition matters. Color matters. Certification matters. Eye appeal matters. The strength and clarity of the variety matter. The market conditions at the time of sale matter. The buyer matters. The auction matters. All of these factors can influence the final result. A circulated example may be worth considerably less than a beautifully preserved mint state coin. A brown coin may sell for less than a red example in comparable condition. A coin with scratches or spots may be less desirable. A professionally certified coin may be easier to sell than an uncertified example. A very high-grade coin can attract advanced collectors who are willing to compete aggressively. This is why there is no single universal price for every example. The best way to understand value is to think in terms of ranges and individual circumstances. A common 1984 Lincoln cent may be worth little more than its face value in circulated condition. A recognized double die example can be worth substantially more. A high-grade certified example can bring thousands of dollars. PCGS lists a documented auction record of $3,910 for a 1984 double die obverse graded MS-68 red. That is a genuine market record and demonstrates the potential value of an exceptional example. It is also important evidence showing why the sensational claim of a $298 million market value should not be presented as fact. PCGS.com https://www.pcgs.com/coinfax/coin/3062 question mark UTM_source=chatgpt.com. the difference between those numbers is enormous. One is a documented auction result. The other is an unsupported claim. This distinction is especially important for people who are new to coin collecting. The internet is full of videos, posts, and articles that use enormous numbers to attract attention. Sometimes these numbers are based on misunderstandings. Sometimes they come from hypothetical estimates. Sometimes they confuse an asking price with a sale price. Sometimes they are simply invented. A responsible collector should always ask for proof. Where did the coin sell? When did it sell? Who sold it? Who bought it? Was it authenticated? What was the grade? Was it a normal coin or a rare variety? Was the price actually paid? These questions can reveal the truth. If the evidence is missing, the claim should be treated cautiously. This does not make coin collecting less exciting. In fact, it makes the hobby more interesting. The genuine story of the 1984 double die cent is already fascinating. Imagine the manufacturing process that produced the die. Imagine the moment when the design was transferred. Imagine the tiny difference that eventually became visible on thousands of coins. Imagine those coins entering circulation. Imagine people using them for everyday purchases. Imagine collectors discovering the unusual characteristics. Imagine the variety becoming documented. Imagine examples being preserved. Imagine decades later, collectors still searching for them. This is the journey of a collectible coin. The coin becomes a time capsule. It connects the past to the present. The 1984 cent also tells us something about American manufacturing. The United States Mint produces enormous quantities of coins. The process is highly technical. The metal must be prepared. Planches must be manufactured. Dies must be created. Presses must be operated. Coins must be inspected. The finished products must be transported. When billions of objects are manufactured, small variations can occur. Most are insignificant. Some are interesting. A few become collectible. This is why errors and varieties have such an important place in numismatics. They show the human and mechanical side of coin production. A perfect coin represents the intended design. An error or variety reveals something about the process that created it. That is why collectors often describe errors as mistakes with history. The mistake itself may have been tiny, but the story can last for generations. This is particularly true when the variety becomes scarce. A collector might own a coin that was struck in a few minutes, but remains in a collection for decades. The coin may eventually be passed from one collector to another. A child may inherit it from a parent. A grandchild may discover it in an old collection. The coin continues its journey. That is the beauty of collecting. The object survives. The people change. The story continues. The 1984 Lincoln cent is also a reminder of how important preservation can be. If you find a potentially valuable coin, protect it. Do not clean it. Do not polish it. Do not rub it with a cloth. Do not use harsh chemicals. Do not attempt to make it shine. A coin's original surface is part of its history. Cleaning can leave scratches. Polishing can create unnatural brightness. Chemical treatments can damage the surface. Even fingerprints can cause problems if left for long periods. Handle coins by their edges whenever possible. Store them in appropriate holders. Keep them away from moisture. Avoid extreme temperatures. Protect them from unnecessary handling. If a coin appears valuable, consider professional advice. Preservation is not complicated. It is simply a matter of avoiding unnecessary damage. This is especially important with copper and copper-colored coins. Their surfaces can change over time. Environmental exposure can affect color. Moisture can cause problems. Improper storage can reduce eye appeal. A beautiful coin that has survived for decades deserves